by showing they're the same is that the rabbis would also have to admit that their claim that Daniel erred is wrong as well, and move the start of the 70 weeks forward to at least the present point in Daniel 9:1. With both of these shifts is that this clearly demonstrates that the Seder Olam, the Talmud, and the rabbis are wrong in saying that the Second Temple stood for only 420 years, and also that their view of Cyrus being the Mashiach Nagid fails because it's now 49 years later than his proclamation. Now you might think, okay, but could they shift Jeremiah 25:11 through 12 forward and keep their 70 weeks view? The answer is no, for the same reasons in the other direction. The Seleucid era started in 312 is a brick wall. There is absolutely no way that they could get gut out years from this point going forward to 70 AD. So, moving Jeremiah 25 forward would have the Persian Empire overlapping the Seleucids by 12 years. And it also moves Cyrus forward to the end of the 70 years, which wouldn't allow for him to be called the Mashiach Nagid at the end of 7 weeks. And you can see that that prophetic person falls within the Babylonian period now too. So, this is not an option for them either, and therefore they must keep them staggered the way they do, because aligning the two refutes their system in either direction. So, demonstrating that these should be aligned blows up their entire system from the get-go. Now, in the Old Testament, there are 3 different writers who discuss Jeremiah's 70-year prophecy. The most obvious one is Daniel, that we're debating over right now. Another is Ezra in 2 Chronicles 36 and Ezra 1. The attempt there is to demonstrate that Ezra was referencing Jeremiah 29:10 being fulfilled in the first year of Cyrus. And the third is Jeremiah himself. The attempt there is to show that Jeremiah in chapter 29 was referencing chapter 25 in his letter, and that the prophecy was only speaking of the Babylonian period. Starting with Jeremiah 29:10 is that it says, "For thus saith the Lord, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you and perform my good word towards you in causing you to return to this place." So it's very apparent that God is talking about the captives at Babylon alone here, and that after those 70 years is that he will bring them back to Jerusalem. The opening verse is explicit in that Jeremiah is addressing the captives in Babylon, that is composed of 2 different exiled groups now, as verse 2 places the letter after the second siege that involved taking Jehoiachin captive to Babylon. Verse 4 reflects on that, with God telling them to stay put, make babies, and seek the peace of the city, because I cause you to be carried there. So it's God telling the people that your captivity is following my plan, and he goes on telling them, "For thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, let not your prophets and your diviners that be in the midst of you deceive you, neither hearken to your dreams which you cause to be dreamed. For they prophesy falsely unto you in my name. I have not sent them, says the Lord." So he is telling them to stop listening to these false prophets that are telling you that your time there will soon be over, and stop trying to make yourselves believe the same things. And this was a real issue because Jeremiah was dealing with it in Jerusalem, as chapter 28 shows Hananiah saying that God is going to bring everyone back, or trying to make a prophecy that everyone is going to come back within 2 years' time, including Jehoiachin. Jeremiah rebuked him and actually prophesied against him, saying that you're going to be the one that's going to die within 2 years. And that's what happened. So, like this, he had to tell those false prophets in Babylon to stop doing it, and everybody there to stop listening to them, because nobody is coming home early. With this context in mind is that it explains why the 70 years were stated in verse 10. It was to remind them that they'll be there for the full 70 years that I, Jeremiah, told you 8 years ago were coming, because you weren't obeying God's commands nor listening to the prophets that he sent you. Therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, because you have not heard my words, behold, I will send and take all the families of the north, says the Lord, and Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them against this land. This land refers to Judah, as verse 11 speaks of Judah and the surrounding nations serving Babylon for 70 years. Then God is going to punish Babylon for their iniquity when they cross the line with him. They may have been his instrument to punish Judah, but it didn't mean that they didn't go beyond that and commit evil atrocities in the process. So, Jeremiah 29 perfectly complements Jeremiah 25 after taking into account the context. And you've seen clearly that there is no allusion in 29 about an additional 18 years or that it's going to go into another empire period where God would then finally bring them back after that. Which is why the 3rd BC Jewish translators for the Septuagint worded it as referring to the point when Babylon's 70 years were almost done, that God will come intervene and bring them back. They are obviously thinking of Cyrus's conquering here and his release of the captives to return back to Jerusalem, which launches us to Ezra's references in 2 Chronicles 36 and Ezra 1. Here in verse 20, it's about the third group of captives that were taken to Babylon, and that their time there would last until the reign of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, to fulfill the 70 years. This fulfillment occurred in the first year of Cyrus with his proclamation for the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. The rabbis will say, I get that, but that's only pointing to Jeremiah 25:11 through 12 and not to Jeremiah 29:10 as well. The reason why they're dead wrong about that is because Cyrus released the captives and allowed them to return to Jerusalem if they wished. And Ezra 2 opens up talking about those who chose to go up out of captivity. The dot connector to Jeremiah 29:10 lies a little further down, with Ezra saying that the captives came again unto Jerusalem. This is exactly what God said that would happen in 29:10, and that promise is not found in 25:11 through 12. That shows conclusively that Ezra was referencing 29:10 and saw its fulfillment in the first year of Cyrus. Which takes us to Daniel now. Here the rabbis admit that Daniel was thinking of Jeremiah 29:10 because of their concocted narrative that he was confused, and by Daniel saying that he read books, plural, the number of the years. This shows that he had both of Jeremiah's accounts in mind, as he likely heard the first one live in Jerusalem before being taken captive to Babylon, and that he would have received the second one in the letter and read it out loud to Nebuchadnezzar himself after his chapter 2 promotion, which makes it really hard then for rabbis to say that the word understood or perceived here is in the wrong sense, and that he should be worded, or that it should be worded, as he was in a state of confusion and still trying to figure things out. The Hebrew word that gets translated as understood is used 19 times in Daniel, where at the beginning it was used to brag about how smart he was in his youth and why that he was brought to Nebuchadnezzar's court for further education. In chapter 8, it's used in the sense that Daniel was trying to figure out what the ram signified after just being instantly translated from Babylon to Susa. Then, after the goat vision played out, Gabriel told Daniel that he'll make him understand all of it. The Hebrew form here is in the hiphil that coincides with the context of just witnessing something brand new, and he needs Gabriel to help make him understand it. So, when Daniel wrote the book, he knew how to describe himself in a state of not knowing something completely, but he didn't do that in 9:2. So, when Gabriel arrived, he was responding to Daniel's prayer for basically the full restoration of the kingdom and informing him of a new prophecy that is now going to cover a 490-year period. So, in a nutshell, Gabriel said, "Yup, Jeremiah's 70 years are over, and that covered the Babylonian period. But that's only the first kingdom of the 4. We are just starting the second one now, and this new prophecy is going to cover the rest of the Gentile kingdoms, with these 6 points being all accomplished by its end." So we've shown how all 3 Old Testament writers saw Jeremiah 25 and 29 speaking of the same time period. But there's one more way to say, sorry rabbis, you're wrong. And that is, by looking at the 3 references to Darius' second year, is that it's said to be linked with 70 years after the temple was destroyed. The question here is, what don't you see within any of these? There are no references to Jeremiah or his prophecy like we saw with Daniel or Ezra. If these 3 writers, including Ezra, saw the staggering, they would have made at least one mentioning that this was fulfilling Jeremiah. But they didn't, because they knew that it wasn't the case. Reminder, hit the subscribe button below, turn on the notification bell, hit the like button, leave a comment, and don't forget to visit us at justscripture.org. But in the meantime, stay salty.